Greetings, my fellow hunters, and welcome to the final Halloween special. This will be my favorite show so far, Castlevania. A show I wanted to talk about so long that I thought, why not do it as a Halloween special since my skills are a lot better now. So, join me while I hunt the king of the vile bloods, Count Dracula. So, my fellow hunters, let the hunt begin. Because Castlevania has 3 seasons, fourth coming out soon, hopefully, I'll be first talking about the first 3 seasons individually, as they all contain different stories and different plots. So it will be better if I just break it down. So starting off, we'll go for season 1. The story of Castlevania doesn't start off with our main protagonist. It actually starts off with the villain, Count Dracula. You see, Count Dracula was actually a vampire who lived far away from humans. He was uninterested in them. He was content on letting them be squabbling little cockroaches, just killing each other day in and day out. That was until one day a woman came to his house, or castle if I must be correct, and wanted to be taught the secrets of medicine and science. For you see, she did not wish to be considered a witch doctor, but a woman of science and advancements. And she actually taught Dracula how to walk like a man instead of a monster. And because of that, they married, and they had a child called Alucard. But I'll get back to him in a second. So basically what happens is that while Dracula was out traveling the world, the church came to Dracula's wife's house and accused her of witchcraft because she did things that were unorthodox and considered evil by the church. And so because of that, her punishment was that she was burnt at the stake. Dracula was arriving just as his wife was being killed and was angry. Therefore, he gave the people of Wallachia 1 year to live. And so that way he can build up an army from the depths of hell to take revenge on the people who murdered his wife. Interesting start. Then it introduces us to our main protagonist, Trevor Belmont, the last son of the House of Belmont. And frankly, a drunken asshole. At first, because you see, he was content on just whiling his days, drinking it away, and just watching the massacre happen while sitting on the sidelines. He's what we would call the reluctant hero because he's had a lot of traumatic childhood, because he lost everything and is just bitter about it. But then he meets a woman named Cypher Banderas, a woman who was part of the Speakers, a tribe of nomads who travel from place to place talking about oral traditions instead of writing them down, which is weird, as they must help the people of a small town fight off the demons while all the while trying to convince them that this priest is just the cause of the problem, not the solution. Later on, they did introduce a third character at the end named Alucard. He is the son of Count Dracula and his wife, a human. So together, they head off to the castle to take on Dracula, but before that, they head to the Belmont estate to study as much as they can about the Count Dracula. Season 2 takes just after the events of Season 1, which is obvious. As in after the victory of the small village, the group now head back to the Belmont estate in order to build up their information on Count Dracula in order to defeat him. All the while at Castle with Dracula, there seems to be internal squabbling between the group as how to deal with the situation they're in, all the while dealing with 2 Forge Masters who have completely different views on how this war should end. On one hand, we have one Forge Master who wishes to wipe out humanity. On the other, we have another who wishes to basically just keep them like dogged animals, or just caged, if I must be frank. And neither one doesn't have a great solution, all the while dealing with a third problem, Carmilla, a vampiress who wishes to dethrone Count Dracula as she believes he's a bit of an old crazy man. At this point he is, because his wife died, and he's going a bit on the crazy side. It does an interesting job of building the world a bit better, because at the time we didn't know how Dracula's internal politics work, and I do find it an interesting change of pace. Instead of them just killing monsters, we see how they interact with each other, how Dracula's little generals are out for their own good and will betray Dracula at the first mention of betrayal. So it's all interesting to see how they build up this interesting thing. As for Season 3, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because in this season there are 3 sub-stories in the season. So for the sake of clarification, I'll be breaking this down into 3 separate parts, starting off with Alucard. After the defeat of his father, Alucard decided to stay at his father's old castle, watching over it and the Belmont estate for intruders that might try to pillage it. After a while, Alucard is starting to lose his mind, but then 2 new characters are introduced. young vampire hunters from the Far East, specifically Japan, who have come from Japan to Wallachia in order to learn how to hunt vampires. At first, it all looks rosy and cheap, and they are happy and they learn from Alucard on how to fight. But it's not all as it seems, but due to events in their past making them distrust people, and so they try to kill Alucard and take the secrets from him, which sadly doesn't end well for them. That's as far as I'm going to go, as we still have Trevor and Banderas to talk about. For them, they are basically now traveling the countryside, taking on whatever remnants of Dracula's armies they left, which leads them to a small town which is headed by a very dubious character called the Judge, as they must try to solve the town's problems as a crazed cult that worship Dracula as some sort of god, wish to destroy the town in order to resurrect him from the dead, which I'm not surprised because that's the plot of every other Castlevania game, but this is the show we're talking about. All the while that there is a dark undercurrent that the Judge in this town has. As you see, the Judge does something horrible things to children as he believes that his town must be perfect. It's a tragic tale because there's such darkness in it, and it really shows to Cypher, who is the optimistic one, that there is darkness in everything, and that everything is not as it seems, which is a fitting tale for such a character who has such a noble heart. And finally, we have the last of the story. The final story to note is Hector, one of the Forge Masters that was under Dracula's employment. You see, Hector, after betraying his master, is now in the clutches of Carmilla, the mad vampiretress who wished to destroy Dracula and take his place, to little success as her armies were decimated. Now Hector is now trapped under that vampire's wrath, and all the while he has to learn to survive, otherwise he could die. But they won't kill him because they need him to create a new army, but he's not going to just create them a new army because they could easily turn on him. So it's just basically understanding on how Hector's going to survive this little mess he's put himself into. But he is seduced by another vampiretress, and unfortunately, due to that, he is now under their servitude due to certain complicated things. My overall thoughts on the story is quite positive, as I do enjoy every moment. I love the characters' interactions. I love how they talk bad about each other, and I do feel like they have character to them, and they don't feel like Mary Sue's or Gary Sue's. They have flaws, they have interests, they are excellently well written, and the voice acting really does help. I especially love the characters in this series. Speaking of which, characters in Castlevania are pretty strong, I'd say, and for the sake of keeping this category short as possible, I'll only be focusing on the main three protagonists, Trevor, Alucard, and Cypher. As I feel there are so many characters in the series, I could talk about each one individually, but like I said, I would be here forever, and I have other things to do. So, let's start off with the main protagonist himself, Trevor Belmont. Trevor is, how do I put it? He's basically a asshole. There's no way of putting it. At the beginning, when we first meet him, Trevor is just a drunk who doesn't care what happens to people. He's just wandering about, just minding his own business. And if people get killed by demons, who cares? It's none of his concern. And it kind of makes him an asshole. But he has reasons for it. His family was disowned by the church, and now he just doesn't care. But later on, he meets a change of heart, if I would say. He realizes that being a hero isn't for glory and fame. Being a hero is basically just doing the right thing, regardless of what other people think. And for me, he does have a really good character arc. Sure, it's quick, but I didn't feel like it was too quick that it was annoying. And hell, he's got a great comedic act with his friend Alucard. He is basically the opposite of Trevor. Well, Trevor at first didn't care about the people until afterwards. Alucard has constantly cared about the people of the lake. He was especially the one that tried to convince Dracula that killing the people will solve nothing and cause nothing but more bloodshed, which is kind of nice, and he is arguably the reasonable one of the group. He tries to bring things reasonably. He's a nice contradiction to Trevor's brashness, as Trevor just loves to rush into things and cause problems. That's how I'd say it. Alucard tries to analyze things carefully, basically. But he's also fun to watch, and his interactions with Trevor and how those two are just basically big man babies because of how they constantly antagonize each other. It's quite entertaining and brings a little levity to the situation with the whole wiping out of humanity thing on the brink of happening. It's actually a nice pace, if you ask me, especially since there is one other character that actually just keeps those two in check from killing each other. The final character is Saifa Banderas, and she is the brains of the operation. She is the technical know-how of all things magical, and she was actually the one who had the bright idea of using magic to try to ensnare Dracula's castle and bring it to them in order for the final assault. And honestly, she's the brains of the whole thing, like I said, and the person that keeps both Trevor and Alucard from basically killing each other, as they always antagonize, and to her chagrin, she does try her best. She's also naive and has a heroic vision of things. Like, in the third season, she basically thought they were heroes adventuring across the land until some things happened and she realized that, truth be told, nothing is ever sunshines and rainbows, and there's always a darker part of humanity. It's also wonderful. It's just lovely to see these interactions with the characters. It's also fabulous. The music is definitely one of the best highlights of this show. It's all well composed. All of it's original, except one, and I'll get to that in a minute. All of it is original composed, and it works beautifully. The orchestral soundtrack with the dreadness of the story, with its more light-hearted moments every now and again, it's all excellently pulled together, and I really appreciate it. It's just one of those things where when you don't notice it, it works, but when you notice it more, it works even better. I love it, and especially when they played Bloody Tears at the final assault on Dracula's castles. My goodness, they got the classical NES theme, revamped it for modern day, and it worked beautifully. The music in time with Saifa, Trevor, and Alucard's battle was fantastic. It was a perfect moment in using that music. It was one of the highlights. Man, I just love it. It's so well done. I could gush about it, but we only have one character slot left, and that would be the animation. The animation for the series is definitely one of the better notes in the series. In fact, everything's been better so far, but this is actually pretty good. The animation is dark, gothic, and has that realistic anime style. I know Castlevania isn't an anime, but the style's there. It's what basically Western animes look like. It just has that Western feel, but in the style of an anime. And it works. I especially love how, for the series, they use a mixture of old and new character designs. Trevor's design was completely different from his original part, I believe. Saifa, I think she remains the same. Alucard was also... He was partially inspired, I think, from the Symphony of the Night, but with a new twist on it. So it was interesting. Hector's design was basically just copy-paste from the original game, one of the old games. And Isaac's design is completely revamped. It looks completely new and different from his original counterpart. Dracula's design? I think it does look fine. It looks menacing, big and tall, and someone I didn't want to mess with. But yeah, overall the character designs and the animation, in my opinion, are really good. In fact, the gothic style really does suit this series plenty. I did have a little problem with his cape because I didn't like it, but that's just more of my personal preference than a complaint with the animation. But overall, the animation is well suited for the series and is fantastic. Props to the animators, because I'm sure this wasn't an easy animation to do. My overall thoughts on this show? If you didn't see the previous things, then you probably skipped ahead, but frankly, it is simply one of the best video game adaptations I've seen in a long time. It fits the games perfectly. If this was an official game, I wouldn't have questioned it, but it's so well done. I'm going to say it right now, and you can basically disagree with me if you want, but Castlevania is the new benchmark. I'm going to compare every video game adaptation from now on. It's going to be definitely here, where I'm going to compare every single video game adaptation from Netflix or anywhere else to Castlevania, because it fits it perfectly. It takes the world, it takes the lore, it takes everything we love about the Castlevania series, and just basically puts it in animation form. It is fantastic. And for a series that didn't originally have plots, detailed plots, it worked well. Adapting Castlevania 3 was an excellent idea. It introduced new characters, and sure, you may be a bit confused, but it's not so difficult that you couldn't just do a little digging yourself. In fact, I understood the lore because I played some of the previous games before, so it was not so difficult for me to understand. But even if you didn't play the previous games, it's alright because it's fine for first-timers as well. So, just like I said for my Dragon Maid review, what are you doing here? Go on Netflix, watch it, and then just be amazed. And I hope Season 4 comes out soon because I am thirsty for more blood. But that's enough of that. Thank you, my fellow hunters, for watching this Halloween special, as this will be the last one for the month. Links into my Twitter and Discord are down below. Please follow me on those. It's very helpful. Subscribe, like, and comment, as those help me stupendously. And as I always say, my hunters, happy Halloween, and may the good blood guide your way.